and join us to receive that.
We'll give you that. Thank you very much.
Okay, Commission President, it's a great honor to have you with us. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over to you. Please, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dear Emma, Madam President, Director General, dear Marcus, distinguished heads of Business Europe, including the heads of the national organizations of Business Europe, members of the European Parliament, distinguished guests, dear friends. It is a privilege for me to be able to address such a distinguished audience in the Cercle de Lorraine for the Business Europe Day on the theme Industry Matters, a statement I can wholeheartedly support. Last week, some of us at the World Economic Forum in Davos discussed what steps are needed to consolidate the way out of the crisis. I was especially happy that this year, the first time since the start of the crisis, Europe was not in the spotlight. This was rather good news. There is, in fact, an overall sentiment that Europe was able to resist and to overcome the most difficult phase of the crisis. This does not mean that we are already out of the crisis. How could we be when we still have such a high level of unemployment and also growth, certainly, but modest growth? But indeed, we should not forget where we come from. Some time ago, experts, analysts, commentators, many of our international partners were speaking of an implosion of the euro. What happened? Not only no member left the euro, we welcomed a new member of the euro, Latvia, that, by the way, has one of the highest growth rates now in Europe. Some more pessimistic were even predicting the disintegration of Europe. In fact, we just added a new member, Croatia. And some were thinking about the collapse of the periphery. The reality is that most of the countries in the periphery are now, through very demanding programs, regaining the lost competitiveness. I will come back to that in a moment. So my point is, we can, if we continue with determination, not only get out of the crisis, but get out of the crisis stronger. Why do I mean stronger? Because with more competitiveness. Because, as I said time and time again, the world after the crisis will not be like the world before the crisis. That was a game changer, not only for us here in Europe, but for the rest of the world. So we have to adapt to a much more difficult, competitive environment. So we have to draw the lessons of the crisis, what it means in terms of financial behavior, financial regulation, financial supervision, so to avoid this kind of mistakes to happen again. We have to learn all the lessons from the crisis in what it means to have a very high level of public debt, to correct these public debts, to reduce them, because as we have seen, growth based on debt, high levels of debt, public or private, it's simply not sustainable. So it's in a way artificial growth. And we have also to take the lessons of what was missing before the crisis in Europe. I mean, a more articulated system of governance, namely in what concerns the euro area. And now we have the instruments, by and large. We are almost there, not yet there, but almost there, to face any crisis, but also to reinforce our system of economic governance through reinforced cooperation, not only in terms of fiscal discipline, that is important, but also in terms of support to reforms. And I believe we are in that phase. I want to be realistic with you. You are very distinguished business leaders. You know better than me what's going on in the real economy. But from the position of observation and the responsibility I have, my full confidence is that we are going to overcome the crisis if we don't sit back and relax, if there is no complacency, if we continue with determination the efforts that we have started. And so this is my first message. That will be my message also to the European Council members, to my colleagues in the European Council when we'll meet in March to analyze issues like the ones we have been discussing here. Competitiveness, growth, energy, climate matters, what we can do also to increase our competitiveness in Europe. So that's why this event today and also your recommendations are perfectly timed to be part of this debate, and I congratulate you for that. One of the meetings where I was participated in Davos, and it was not my suggestion, that name was precisely the new Renaissance of Europe. I found it quite inspiring. I was myself asking if we were not exaggerating. Anyhow, I believe that it's better to have a high goal than to have just two modest goals. Indeed, we also produced recently, as Emma Marcegaglia just mentioned, and I thank you for your kind words, we have just presented this communication on industrial renaissance in Europe. I believe it is time now to give this step further, putting this emphasis in competitiveness and especially on industrial competitiveness. As you know, the last years have been dominated by the crisis. And when we have a crisis like the one we had, the biggest crisis ever since the beginning of the European integration, it's only normal that the heads, the minds of leaders at European or national level are mostly focused on the most immediate issues. Because, in fact, some of our countries were very close to what could become a real catastrophe. We could avoid what will be a completely negative scenario. This year will most likely be the turning point in what has been this deepest, longest recession in European Union countries. A period of pain not only for our business, but first and foremost for our citizens, with 26 million men and women unemployed, and a particularly high level of youth unemployment. But we have reasons to be confident. We have already had 0.2 growth in the third quarter of 2013, a debt down 0.7 in the euro area from the end of the second quarter to the end of the third quarter of 2013. And most important, we have seen investor confidence and consumer confidence coming back. We have seen markets stabilizing. We have seen, in fact, and this is not sufficiently said, that Europe has a trade surplus of 3.4 billion euros. In fact, Europe has a surplus in industry, in services, in agriculture for several years. We have not a surplus in energy and in raw materials, but broadly speaking, Europe remains competitive. And it's important to note that during the crisis, the sector that gave a great contribution to getting out of the crisis, namely to these new figures of growth, was precisely industry. Ireland successfully closed its support program. Ireland has now lower lending rates than some member states that have never entered the program. And Ireland has the strongest industrial production rates with 11.7%. Spain, last week, formally exited specific program for banks successfully, and now Spain is regaining its competitiveness with confidence coming back. Portugal's refound growth during the second quarter of last year, with unemployment and interest spreads going down. And Portugal is expected to exit its program of adjustment next May. Greece's painful efforts are starting to bear fruit, with an expected primary surplus and also expected growth this year, in 2014, even if there is still a way to go so that we can speak about full recovery.